Reading 91 from the Psychological Commentaries on the Teaching of Gurdjieff and Ouspensky by Dr. Maurice Nicoll, Volume 2. Quaramide Ugle, September 1st, 1945. Further commentary on making work effort. In this work, all effort must be intelligent. It must have behind it an aim that you yourself understand intelligently, and it must be carried out with your own consent. All real effort, that is, intelligent effort, is about developing the undeveloped sides of ourselves. Each of us has a machine that is only developed to a small extent on one side of itself. All intelligent work effort is about developing all the sides of the machine to which we are connected and bringing it to a right state of working. However, most people have the idea that effort means simply doing something you do not want to do without understanding why it is necessary to do it. Or again, people think that effort consists only in not doing something, in refraining from something. Now, all effort is based on understanding, and if you make effort without understanding what you are doing, it cannot lead anywhere. It has no meaning for you. A man in this work, through self-observation, may come to know that he is always in one center and does not use his other centers. If he has begun to understand the work, he will make an aim to make efforts in the direction of his undeveloped centers or parts of centers. This is intelligent aim, intelligent effort. To make an effort in a direction that has no real connection with what one needs is quite a good experience, but it may have no result because it is not being done from one's own understanding and one's own insight into what is necessary for oneself. I may decide to get up early in the morning and dig all day in the field and find myself too tired to think afterwards. I may then think it is necessary for me to get up still earlier and dig harder the next day. But am I making this effort from my understanding? Such efforts are artificial, arbitrary efforts. They are quite useful at first because they give a great deal of matter for self-observation and for that rare form of thinking. What am I really doing and for what reason? For example, it might be much better for me not to go and dig in the field all day long, but instead to make an effort in regard to my emotional center and my negative feelings, or to make an effort on my thinking center, and work something out in my mind that I have avoided doing. You have all heard that there is a class of effort in the work called making effort to avoid effort. Probably some of you have noticed and become conscious of the fact that you should make some different effort, say with the mind, or in not identifying with unpleasant emotions, and instead of so doing, you go, so to speak, to dig in the field. It is easier, but it is not intelligent. It is not based on understanding our own situation. What do you have to do to change your relationship to your own centers? Now, the first aim of this work is to become number 4 man, that is, balanced man, and to cease being a one-sided man, either a number 1 man, purely physical man, or a number 2 man, or a number 3 man. In life, everyone is one-sided, one-centered, and for this reason no one understands anyone else, and everything is in the muddle that it is obviously in. Right effort will give you far more results than unintelligent effort, but you will only get to the point of beginning to understand what right effort means when you observe yourself sincerely and quite objectively. Otherwise, you will not be able to see how one-sided you are and how instead of traveling on 4 wheels, you try to travel on 1. At the same time, as I said, artificial efforts are useful for the purposes of self-observation and making you aware of second force. You have to fire off, as it were, many bullets in different directions, but after a time you will find that there is one bullet that will hit the mark, one thing that you should do. Supposing a person is very critical or slanderous and he decides to make the effort of digging all day in the field. Certainly, he is not hitting the mark. He is making no effort against his too great tendency to criticize others or to slander others openly or privately. He is not taking hold of himself in the right way. He does not see that where effort should lie for him is precisely in the direction of not being too critical or talking in a slanderous way about others. At the same time, physical effort is necessary in this work. G taught that we have to break our laziness, physically speaking, and in this way go beyond what we ordinarily would avoid in the direction of physical effort, in the whole realm of pots and pans and digging and working with our hands and so on, or we will be handicapped and will be unable to work on ourselves in any other way. Now, if you watch a person working physically, you will often notice that the person is not working at all, but simply doing what he or she has been told to do, and not really consenting to it or thinking intelligently. G said that in all physical work, all centers should be employed, and then it becomes intelligent and useful. But suppose I dig in the field all day and never notice what I am doing and how to use my spade, but simply go on mechanically. Then I am not working. This is called mechanical effort as distinct from conscious effort. The simplest way of understanding the difference is to notice what you are doing, to notice your resistance to what you are doing, and to try to work on yourself in such a way that you are doing it yourself with your own consent, with your own understanding. Then the effort becomes, relatively speaking, conscious effort, and you will end up the day with force instead of being merely exhausted and possibly negative. A man, G said, who is working physically should try to master what he is doing, namely to notice what he is doing and how to do it more easily, faster, and more intelligently. Everything you do mechanically is lost, but everything you do more consciously begins to belong to you. For example, mechanical goodness is useless in the work, but conscious, active goodness gives you force. Doing something difficult at the moment when you feel very disinclined to do it, if it is done intelligently, will always give you force. But if you work in any way with continual internal considering, with continual thoughts and feelings that other people should do this and not you, your efforts are useless, and this applies even to the small things you do here. Our task is to use parts of centers which we do not ordinarily use, so as to open up this 3-story house in which we live, and in which we inhabit only a very small part. It is just this inhabiting a small part of this 3-story house that makes life tedious and produces that curious staleness that everyone feels. Now, if you do not try to transform the day and what it brings, that is, if you do not make conscious effort towards any of the events of the day, you will not be making work effort. You are reacting mechanically, that is, as you have always done, to each moment of the day. That is undesirable. After a time when the work is beginning to touch you, you will hate feeling that you are simply doing everything mechanically. Then perhaps you will begin to know what it means to transform the day, to transform the moment, this very moment in which you are listening to this paper. We have this possibility of transforming each moment. We have this possibility of approaching life quite differently. One way is not to talk about everything, to keep silence. This work is a discipline in every direction, for every center, not only when you are here, but when you are engaged in your necessary affairs of life. You can bring the atmosphere of the work into everything that you do. But if you identify with everything and make inner accounts, this will be impossible. Life will eat you. Taking things from the work point of view can alter your being. If you make effort of this kind, namely to bring the work into what you do, you will be working intelligently and making intelligent effort. This must not, of course, be done heavily, but with a certain lightness of touch. that you will gradually find out about for yourself. You must not show too much that you are working. The supreme effort of the work lies in making effort against your chief feature, whether you are digging in a field or listening to a meeting or cooking or traveling by train or are alone with yourself or surrounded by other people. The reason is that chief feature enters into the way you think, the way you relate yourself to others. It enters into your emotions and enters into your movements and the way you do your life work, as well as into your conceit and appetites and quarrels. But it is very difficult even to begin to catch glimpses of your chief feature, and it is quite useless to speculate theoretically on what it is. I would advise you to think about what was said at the beginning of this paper, about making intelligent effort based on self-observation. I would ask you this question: where, through self-observation, do you perceive that you avoid making certain kinds of effort? Where do you always get negative? At what point do you always identify? At what point do you find things intolerable? Or again, what do you feel is your right? What is owed to you before you can consent to do anything? We all have a favorable idea of ourselves, but when we are stirred up by what we think intolerable in external circumstances, we soon realize that we are very limited people, capable of only a very little goodwill and very little effort. You may be quite sure that your chief feature has something to do with all this. We have to make effort beyond this narrow limit in which we usually make effort. G said that only extra effort counts, and I fancy that each one of us should know by now what extra effort is, whether intellectual, emotional, or physical. If we cannot get beyond our mechanical limitations, if we only remain in the narrow sphere of ourselves, we have no chance of becoming number 4 man, balanced man. We shall have no idea what extra effort means. A man whose center of gravity is in the moving center would never for a moment think that he has to make intellectual effort and really think. He will not see where extra effort lies for him. And if he decides to make extra effort, he will only dig longer in the field. But this is not intelligent effort, which I now connect with extra effort. Now I will bring this short paper to a close and ask you to think only about what intelligent effort means for yourselves, in view of the fact that we seek to become the many-sided balanced man, a person in whom all the centers contribute their different meanings to his daily life.